Shalom Aleichem and welcome to our program. So we present Hasidic philosophy. We try to do a few times a week. We don't always make it, but we try our best to bring messages of hope and of God's love. This week we're reading Parshas Vayechi, the very last parsha in the book of Genesis. Here we read about the end of the life of our patriarch Jacob and his 12 sons. This message of Jacob with his 12 sons, this image of Jacob and his 12 sons is something very important, crucial in Judaism. And particularly the holiest of the sons, Joseph Tzaddik, he's called a Tzaddik, Benjamin is also called a Tzaddik, Benjamin is also called the righteous one, but Yosef is the Merkava to me, this Yesod, Yosef or Mashpir. And so it's the tremendous lessons of Joseph, but also the lessons of all of the children altogether. And the biggest lesson we have from the concept of our 12 tribes is that we have an idea that our sages say, Shivim Panim L'Torah, that there are 70, we said there were 70 souls who came together with Jacob to Egypt, all together, 70 descendants. And this is the representatives, the prototype of how the nation of Israel is supposed to be a light unto the nations. And so the 70 souls represent the 70 basic nations that are mentioned in Genesis. However, our sages tell us that there are 70 faces of the Torah, Shivim Panim L'Torah. This means that there's not just one way to approach the Torah, but you have to approach the Torah. You can't call it something else. It's not Torah. But within Torah, there are many different paths. Not only that, the Arizal says really there's 600,000, Shishim Riboy, paths, meaning that each soul, meaning 600,000 is that number of how many men were standing at Sinai, and that represents the basic souls of the Jewish people, that meaning that each individual has his own connection to God through the Torah that no one else can have. And so, similarly, we have the 12 tribes, each one having their own path in serving God. And so too we have today among the Jewish people many different paths. And they're all holy and they're all kosher. You could be Ashkenazic or you could be Sephardic. You could be Hasidic or you could be a Litvisher, you could be a Yeker. Whatever you are. Doesn't matter. All different types of Hasidim, all different schools in the Lithuanian Yeshivas, all different Sephardic communities, and Yemenites and different types of Yemenites and so forth. And they're all holy, and they're all approaching Torah. And they have their own minhagim. They have their own nusach tefillah. So too, our sages tell us, and the Kabbalists tell us, that each tribe had its own nusach tefillah. That each of the 12 tribes prayed according to their own version of the liturgy. The basic structure is the same, but different. So too, today, we have the different versions. It's very famous. We know that the Arizal said that his way was called the Shara Kolel, the 13th gate, and that's what we have, Nusach Sfard and the Sephardic Nusach, even though there are many different variances within that and different customs. But the point of this is that the Torah is a living, breathing document. We just marked this past week Asar B'Tevis, the 10th of Tevis. It was a fast day which actually represents 3 different disasters that happened to our nation. On 3 different days in the calendar, and yet the worst, the one that's recorded in the Book of Kings, the siege of Jerusalem, that happened on the 10th of Tevis. And that one is the day that we fast. However, we commemorate on the 9th day the death of Ezra and Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah. And on the 8th day, the translation of the Septuagint, which is the Targum Yeshivas, the translation of the Torah into Greek. And our sages say that the day when the Torah is translated into Greek, a tremendous darkness came upon the world. Even though it was a great miracle how it happened, that King Ptolemy of Egypt, he asked that the Torah should be translated into Greek, and he got 70 rabbis, and he locked them all by themselves so they shouldn't talk to each other, and because he wanted to make sure he would have exactly with the Torah and not their own interpretation. And a miracle happened that they all translated the same thing, even though a few things they decided to do different. For example, if you look at the Septuagint, the first word is theos, is God. God created in the beginning, as opposed to in the Hebrew it says Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning created God. Because people might mistakenly think, heretical thought, that the word Bereshis, that the word in the beginning somehow, that was the one who, God forbid, created God somehow. And so all 70 miraculously decided to make the first word God. But why do we ascribe mourning to this time of when the Torah was translated to Greek? We have just the opposite. The holy Unclus Hager, the holy convert Unclus, translated the Torah into Aramaic. And we said his translation was inspired by Ruach HaKodesh and by the Spirit of holiness, almost close to prophecy. That was the level of holiness that he was on. And his translation is treated with so much respect that it's liturgical to us, and it's printed in most chumashim, that the average basic version of the Bible that we have in Hebrew, of the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, in Hebrew, you'll have the actual text, together with the translation of Unclus into Aramaic, and the commentary of Rashi. And so what's the difference? Why is the Targum of Unclus treated with so much respect and holiness, and the miraculous translation of the Septuagint considered to be a grave disaster which we mourn and fast? Because there's a tremendous difference between the translation of Unclus, the Targum of Unclus, and the Septuagint of the Greek translation. The difference is that the Greek translation is just that. It's a translation. And the Unclus is not really a translation. The Unclus is mostly a translation, but also a little bit of a commentary. Because the Torah is not only the Bible that we have. God gave us the Bible, and God explained it to us. The Torah is both what's written and what was explained. And so if you just take the Bible without the explanation that God gave us, it's a body without a soul. And so Unclus's translation was a living translation, was a soulful translation. The translation of the Targum Yeshivas, of the Septuagint, not by fault of the rabbis, but by the decree of Ptolemy, was a cold, lifeless, dead translation. Because they wanted the Bible just to be a book to put on the shelf, and not to be a living, breathing entity. So the Greek translation was stagnant and cold. And Targum Unclus and other holy Targum, and all of the Mefarshim, all of the commentaries that we have, make the Torah alive. And I know other translators that we have today, also the translations that we have, no one translation is perfect, but there's certain translations, famous Rabbi Kaplan had the living Torah, because he's not saying that it's not a dead document, it's a living document. So when you just translate it like this, word for word, you don't capture the Torah. You can have the Bible, but it's not the Torah. But when the Torah is a living document. It's living and breathing because it's the word of the living God. And the Zohar tells us, Yisrael, that since the Torah is the mind of God, and God is totally one, when you're learning Torah, you're learning God. You're unified with God. And so we also become unified with God when we're learning His Word. Because it's not just studying a book.